On today's episode, Texas football lands four-star defensive lineman Dylan Spencer and their 2023 recruiting class. I tell you what the NCAA tournament bracket would look like if the players were playing football instead of basketball. And your Texas Longhorns baseball team is struggling right now. I tell you what's been going on and what they need to do to get back on track. Longhorn Nation, happy hump day.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Longhorns, your daily number one source for all things Texas athletics. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jonathan Davis, the voice of University of Texas football and basketball. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Longhorns your first listen of the day. For my audio listeners, make sure you're subscribed on YouTube for exclusive content and to put a face behind the voice of your favorite podcast. Make sure you like us, rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. Anything less than that, I have to believe you're not listening hard enough. You know how we do it on this podcast. Let's get right into it. And speaking of getting right into it, it is all gas, no brakes for the 2023 recruiting class and the Texas Longhorns as they land 4-star defensive lineman Dylan Spencer out of C.E. King High School in Houston, Texas. 6'4", 240 pounds going into his senior year of high school, has a great frame and probably will put on 15 to 25 more pounds, could get up to 260, 265 by the time he even takes a snap at the University of Texas. So a really good and big frame. He is ranked 175th nationally, the 175th best prospect in the country. He is number 25th at his position, the 25th ranked defensive lineman in the country and the 31st best prospect in the state of Texas, a blue chip prospect defensive lineman. Texas adds their second recruit to their 2023 recruiting class. They already secured Jamel Johnson, the number 139th prospect currently in the country, the safety out of Arlington, and they add to that defense with 4-star defensive lineman Dylan Spencer. So this is an outstanding pickup by Sark and the defensive line coach Bo Davis, who actually pried Dylan Spencer away from his alma mater. So Bo Davis went to LSU, and LSU just was one of the many schools that were in for the commitment of Dylan Spencer. He was also considering Arizona State, Baylor, U of H, Texas A&M, USC, and then, of course, Texas and LSU. Now, this is a player that, the experts weren't necessarily expecting to come to the University of Texas. I don't know if the Longhorns were expecting him to come to the University of Texas. And, yesterday he tweeted that he was 112% committed to the Longhorns, 112% committed to the 40 acres, creating some more momentum for the Texas Longhorns in their pursuit of another top 5 recruiting class in 2023. We know that, I was going to say Bijan Robinson. We know that Ruben Owens, the 5-star running back, Arch Manning, 5-star quarterback, and Jonte Cook, the 4-star receiver out of DeSoto, will be visiting the University of Texas next week. We also know that they are in the mix for 5-star linebacker Anthony Hill out of Denton, the number 1 linebacker in the country. So once again, this creates a lot of momentum for the Texas Longhorns. They've received some crystal ball predictions, which I talked about on the podcast yesterday, for some players in the state of Texas. And now with this commitment of Dylan Spencer, I think that only is going to want other players to see, only going to want other players to come to the University of Texas as they see the momentum they're building. So we're going to talk about Dylan Spencer a little bit more. Last year, he had 32 total tackles, 11 tackles for loss, and 8 sacks. So he's only going to continue to build on that in his senior year. 3 things that I noticed when I was watching the tape of Dylan Spencer, 4-star defensive lineman out of C.E. King in Houston, Texas. He's a really versatile 3-down player. He has the ability to set the edge in the run game and rush the passer. He is elite at setting the edge. He does not allow plays to get outside of him. He forces the run back inside into the trenches, and then he does a really good job of beating his matchup and collapsing down to get to the ball carrier. He's really good at stuffing the run. That's probably his number one trait right now. And the thing that I think he can come in right away next year and do for the Texas Longhorns, as we've seen that rush defense hasn't been great. The defense overall hasn't been great, but they've made some moves on the defensive end, personnel-wise and coaching-wise, to shore that up. Dylan Spencer being one of those moves. He is very powerful. Of course, he's 6'4", 240. He's already really big. He's going against high school offensive linemen, but the power and the strength jump off on tape. He's really good at beating his matchup quickly and getting into the trenches to stop the run. Also, once again, like I said, he sets the edge and makes sure that runs do not get outside of him. So a very good run stuffer out of Houston, Texas. And then he's patient and disciplined in his pass rush. So he doesn't just shoot off the defensive line and try to get to the quarterback. He kind of sets up the offensive lineman, keeps his eyes in the backfield, and diagnoses the play before he makes his move, which allows him, once again, to not get outrun in the run game, be in position to stop the run, and then still have time to get to the quarterback on their drop back. So a really good player in 4-star defensive lineman, Dylan Spencer. And we saw that this was a point of emphasis last year in Sark's 2022 recruiting class, bringing in 8 defensive linemen, 7 of them which were 4-stars. So they've now brought in their 8 4-star defensive linemen in 2 recruiting classes in Dylan Spencer, and that will only continue to increase. And this is a point of emphasis not only to stop the run and build up this defense while you're in the Big 12, but these are the type of players you want to bring in, these bigger defensive linemen that are proficient at stopping the run towards your transition to the SEC, where games are truly won in the trenches. Now, I think the Big 12 kind of has that reputation for the high-flying offenses, nobody really playing defense and anything like that. We saw Baylor, teams like Baylor and Oklahoma State last year kind of do it in the trenches. Oklahoma is a team that's always tried to do it in the trenches. But this is something that Texas is really invested in. I've called them Alabama West a couple times on the podcast. But this is, like I said, something they're investing in is that defensive line. Once again, bringing in 4-star defensive lineman Dylan Spencer out of Houston, Texas. This is a really good get. 2 top 100 prospects for the Texas Longhorns recruiting class right now. They are 25th in the country. And as they continue to bring in prospects, continue to get commitments from these recruits, it's only going to continue to get higher. I think they'll have another top 5 recruiting class by the time that they're done. So keep an eye on 5-star linebacker Anthony Hill. He is a perfect fit, one of those do-it-all linebackers in Pete Kakowski's system. I think that if they could get him, you're looking at possibly one of the best defenses in the country, one of the most talented defenses in the country over the next few years. All signs point to them getting a commitment from one of the best cornerbacks in this class, 4-star cornerback Javian Toviano. So to continue to build up that back end, they already have the commitment once again from 4-star safety out of Arlington, Jamel Johnson. And so now you bring in Dylan Spencer in this recruiting class, and then you go back to the offensive end. We know that Reuben Owens, Jonte Cook, and Arch Manning will all be visiting the 40 acres next weekend. If you're able to get a commitment from all 3 of them, even 2 of them, you're looking at, once again, another top 5 recruiting class for your Texas Longhorns football team. So it is all gas, no brakes for 2023. Again, Sark brings in 4-star lineman Dylan Campbell, 6'4", 240, really good size, really good frame, elite at setting the edge and stopping the run game, and can get to the quarterback. Had 8 sacks last year. Look for him to build on that in his senior season, on his way to Austin, Texas, to play for Sark and the Texas Longhorns. Really good get by Sark and Bo Davis as they continue to build up this football team and continue to build up this recruiting class to be able to compete in the Big 12, ultimately in the SEC, and in the college football playoff. Coming up next, I'm telling you what would happen if the NCAA tournament was played in football instead of basketball with the same bracket. Betting, then you need to go to Stat Hero. Stat Hero's NCAA single game pick'ems pits the star players against each other in an amazing hybrid between fantasy and sports gambling. Take control back from those handicappers that always seem to have the advantage. Start focusing on the players you know best with a gameplay that doesn't rely on big spreads, long odds, or funky props. Stat Hero gives you the advantage, resulting in their gamers winning 4 times more often. Why? Because Stat Hero eliminates the mystery about who or what you are going up against. In addition to their pick'em games, they also have dozens of lineups you can comb through to take on head-to-head. They simply post sets of players for you to take on with the set of players you choose. Stat Hero is the easiest and fastest way to get your sports action fix. The simple, sleek gameplay will have you playing in minutes. This is what daily fantasy was meant to be. Sign up for free right now at stathero.com/locked-on and use promo code locked on for a 100% deposit match. That's stathero.com/locked-on, promo code locked on for a 100% match. Stathero.com/locked-on, promo code locked on. Terms and conditions apply. And if you're hungry, you need to try out Built Bar with incredible flavors like yummy cinnamon churro, coconut marshmallow, and banana cream pie. These are going to be your new favorite. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, 100% real chocolate. Low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bars with these. Other flavors include mint brownie, coconut, almond, and white chocolate cookies and cream. At Built Bar, they are all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, then figure out how to make it healthy. And I don't know how, but they pull it off every single time. Go to built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, Longhorn Nation. So college football Reddit came up with the idea to simulate basically what would happen if the NCAA tournament was done with the same seeding, the same teams, but yet it was played in football instead of basketball. And so I have to give the disclaimer off the top that the defending national champions and the Georgia Bulldogs are not in this tournament at all because their basketball team isn't the best. Let's just be nice and say that. And so that takes away the defending champions already. So we're going to start in the East region now. Another crazy thing that happens is the number one seed in the tournament overall, the number one seed in the East region, Gonzaga, does not have a football program, so they're automatically disqualified. We're going to go straight to the Sweet 16. They have Boise State facing off against Arkansas. Arkansas, a team that hung 40 on Texas last year and beat them. They have Arkansas beating Boise State. No argument from me there. And then to advance to the Elite Eight, they have Alabama versus Michigan State. I think that this game was actually played. Michigan State could give Alabama a run for their money. You got running back Kenneth Walker, who's one of the best players in the country. Then you got Coach Mel Tucker, one of the best coaches in a competitive, Big Ten. But ultimately, I think Alabama wins that game. But I think, Michigan State could hang with them for a little bit. In the Elite Eight, you have Alabama versus Arkansas. They have Alabama beating their SEC rival Arkansas to get to the Final Four. No arguments from me there. In the West region, Baylor is the number one seed. They have Baylor beating North Carolina in the round of 32 to get to the Sweet 16. I think if that game was played, Sam Howell at quarterback for North Carolina could win that game. I'd probably take Baylor, but North Carolina definitely would have a chance in that matchup. They have Texas beating Virginia Tech in their first round matchup, but losing to Purdue in the round of 32. And, I know there's some Longhorn hate out there. I know we went 5-7 last year, but I do not agree with that at all. I think Texas would definitely beat Purdue and make it to the Sweet 16. And then I honestly think that, Texas could beat Virginia Tech, beat Purdue, and then beat Kentucky as well to make it to the Elite Eight and possibly even beat Baylor. If we're talking about football, this is a team that had a lead on Baylor last year and ultimately let it go, and Baylor won that game. And I know Baylor won the Big 12, but I definitely think Texas could have beat Baylor last year. I definitely think Texas can and will beat Baylor this year. So I didn't like how they did the Longhorns in this bracket. Having us lose to Purdue in the second round, I wasn't really feeling that. Like I said, I think we would be an Elite Eight or Final Four team, but, I'm going to go with what they put. So they have Baylor beating UCLA in the Sweet 16. They have Kentucky beating Purdue in the Sweet 16. I have no arguments there on those two matchups. Once again, I just think Texas would have went a little further than they have them. But, I'm the salty Longhorn fan on the podcast. I get it. Then they have Baylor beating Kentucky to make the Final Four. I think if those matchups did shake out that way, I think Baylor ultimately would beat Kentucky to get to the Final Four and match up against Alabama. On the South region, we have TCU versus U of H in the Sweet 16. I think that would be a really good matchup. They have U of H moving on past TCU. I'm not mad at that. I think they probably would win, but TCU definitely has a chance to win that game and would give them a run for their money. They have one of the best rivalries in college football shaking up in the bracket. Michigan versus Ohio State. They have Michigan taking that matchup. We saw Michigan win that game last year. I think if they were to play it again, I think Ohio State would win, but I have no argument with Michigan beating Ohio State since we just saw it in last football season. And so then they have Michigan beating U of H in the Elite Eight to get to the Final Four. No argument from me there. We're going to move to the Midwest region. They have Iowa State beating LSU in the first round. Now, Iowa State did have really good players in Breece Hall, Brock Purdy, and Charlie Collar at tight end last year. And I know that LSU hasn't been as great since they've won the national championship, but I do think that LSU probably would give Iowa State a run for their money, if not beat Iowa State. So I don't know if I would have Iowa State advancing past LSU in the first round, but it's not crazy. So in the Sweet 16, they have San Diego State and Iowa, with Iowa beating San Diego State to get to the Elite Eight. Then they have Wisconsin and Auburn. They have Wisconsin beating Auburn to get to the Elite Eight. I'm not sure if I would take Wisconsin over Auburn. I'm probably taking Auburn in that matchup. And I noticed there's a little Big Ten bias in this bracket. Out of the 8 Elite Eight teams, they had 5 of them from the Big Ten in Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan State, Michigan, and Ohio State. So we know that, somebody in the Midwest is working at Reddit College Football, or, they're giving them a little home cooking, because I don't know if 5 out of 8 Elite Eight teams will all be from the Big Ten. But of course, it's based off of who actually made the tournament. And once again, Georgia, the defending national champions, not being in the bracket at all. So they have Wisconsin over Iowa to get to the Final Four. We have Alabama and Baylor. They take Alabama over Baylor in that matchup, which I think everybody listening probably would as well, unless you're in Waco, Texas. They have Michigan over Wisconsin in a Big Ten matchup to get to the championship game. I'm probably going to take Michigan over Wisconsin as well. You have Alabama versus Michigan in the national championship game. And of course, most of the country would take Alabama. They have Alabama winning the national championship in the NCAA tournament, where football is played rather than basketball, but all seeds remain the same. I thought this was a really cool and fun idea. And outside of Texas losing to Purdue in the second round, which I'm going to have to send a letter, I'm going to have to send a tweet to somebody and ask them, what they got against the Longhorns, what they got against the burnt orange and white. I thought this was a really cool bracket. Coming up next, the Texas Longhorns baseball team is struggling, to say the least. I tell you what's going on with them and how they can bounce back moving forward. Today's episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it is now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, Longhorn Nation. So your Texas Longhorns baseball team, a couple of weeks ago, we can be nostalgic. They were 11-0. They were number 1 team in the country. We thought that they were going to go undefeated. We thought it would be a cakewalk to Omaha, a cakewalk to winning their 7th College World Series. And since then, things have not been great. So this Texas baseball team started off 11-0. They are now 2-5 in their last 7 games. They are dealing with the season-ending injury to their Sunday starter, Tanner Witt, and I do not think that this team has been able to overcome that loss so far or shake back from the news of that loss. I think on the baseball diamond has hurt them with their pitching staff. But I think psychologically, knowing that they've lost one of the best pitchers in the country has affected them as well. So since the day that Tanner Witt was scratched from his start, they are 2-5. They've lost to UCLA, Texas State. They lost to South Carolina twice in a doubleheader, and they lost to College of Charleston last night. This team has given up 40 runs in their last 7 games. Once again, 2-5 in those games, giving up 40 runs in their last 7 games. They only gave up 13 runs in the first 11 games. Once again, they gave up 13 runs in their first 11 games. They've given up 40 runs in their last 7. So the pitching staff has not been great in the last 7 games. And the bats haven't been, as great as they were earlier, but they still have put runs on the board, just haven't been able to pick up the pitching staff. And then in some games where the pitching staff has been able to hold the opposing team to less than 4 or 3 runs, the pitching staff hasn't been able to pick up the bats, as they haven't been able to be great at the same time recently. And that's why they're 2-5 in their last 7. So now they do play against the Citadel tonight, and then they have a weekend Friday, Saturday, and Sunday series against the University of Incarnate Word. So look for your Texas Longhorns baseball team, who is now ranked number 2 in the country, to bounce back and hopefully win. Go 3-1 in that stretch, or 4-0 against some teams that they should beat. Now, don't panic. There is a time for panic. This is still one of the best teams in the country, still one of the best rosters from top to bottom, but you're not getting Tanner Witt back this year, and this is a huge loss for a team that has aspirations of winning their 7th College World Series. But I think they'll be all right. Hopefully they'll get it together. Once again, I just think psychologically they haven't bounced back yet from the loss of Tanner Witt, but this team has too much talent to not ultimately bounce back and be one of the most feared teams going into the tournament this summer. Longhorn Nation, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, your daily number 1 source for all things Texas athletics, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, it is all gas, no brakes. The Texas Longhorns football team lands 4-star defensive lineman Dylan Spencer in their 2023 recruiting class. Longhorn Nation, peace.